and it's my pleasure to have Medea Benjamin here from Code Pink.
First, let me make a plea for some peace within the peace movement. I agree that we should be out and focusing on our legislators and being there during the week, but I also think it's important for us to come together as a community and revive our sense of community, feel that we're part of a community, especially now, because I think since Obama got elected, it's been very hard to get the peace movement to be active again. And it's our moment to really reactivate that. You know, we're at a very strange time in this country's history right now because you have political opinion on our side. We have 57% of the American people saying the war in Afghanistan is wrong. And if you look at Obama's own party, the Democrats, that's over 70% saying they don't want this war, and certainly they don't want an escalation of this war. And yet you have a president who has commissioned his own generals to give him a report, and we know what that report is saying. That report is saying more troops. So Barack Obama is boxing himself into a corner he created for himself by having this public report of a general saying more troops when he has the public saying, no, we want to get out of Iraq, not add more troops to Iraq. And so in the middle of that discussion, I and some of my Code Pink colleagues felt like we had to go to Afghanistan ourselves. And we went there at risk to our lives because it's a dangerous place to be. And we went to hear specifically from the women. And we got together with all kinds of women. And I remember sitting in one meeting where we were at a shelter where girls had been brought in who had been beaten, sold by their fathers, sold into forced marriages where they were beaten by their husbands, very, very young girls. And one of them was about 15 years old. She had just come to the shelter. She was sold at the age of 8. She had never been to school in her entire life. And we were asking them questions about how was their life in the shelter, what did they want to do in the future. And then one of the people in our group asked them a question that I thought was kind of inappropriate. They said, what do you think of the US policy? And I thought, you know, this girl's never been to school. She probably has no idea about US policy. And she said, well, she started, and this was all being done through translation, and she talked for a long time, and they were, you know, the translators were laughing, and then she was talking, they were laughing, and I was saying, what is this girl saying? And she said, well, you know, the way I look at it is the United States is so powerful that if it really wanted to end the war in Afghanistan and beat the Taliban, they could do it really easily. But I think they actually like creating chaos in our country, because the way I see it, they give a lot of money to pay for soldiers to come, and there must be companies that are making a lot of money from that, and then they must be selling a lot of weapons to these insurgents to then blow up things so that you have to have more soldiers come. And the way I see it is somebody's making a lot of money from this war, but they don't want this war to end. And I thought, out of the mouths of babes, never been to school, but boy, was that girl sharp. And you look around in Afghanistan and it just gives me chills to see what's going on there. Sending our young people to fight and die in a war that the American public doesn't support and the Afghan people don't support. And then you see who is making money from that. I mean, of course, most of the money is being made here in the United States, and a lot of that here in Texas, where so much of those weapons are made. But you also see the people who are being sent over as the contractors. And you know, we have more military contractors in Afghanistan now than we have US soldiers. We're going to have 68,000 US soldiers by the end of the year, and already there's 74,000 military contractors. And they're swarming around the place. You go onto the bases and all you see is military contractors. KBR, which is, you know, Cheney's former company, swarming all over there, providing all of the, quote, goods and services to the military. You see the private military contractors, as somebody said, Blackwater, that now is known by another name called Z. And there is Z, that they are the ones in charge of guarding the U.S. ambassador, not even our own troops. It's Blackwater there. And then that group, Armor Group, you've heard about Armor Group, the ones that like drink the shots out of each other's butts. Those are the ones that are guarding the U.S. Embassy. We went to visit somebody from AID, and there they were all the Armor Group. After this incredible scandal, they're still there, making their money. And the troops, of course, are very angry at these contractors who are making 4 or 5, 10 times more than the U.S. troops themselves. But you can see all the money being made. And you know, General Petraeus once said himself that there was an 80-20 solution, that 80% of our funds should go into economic development and 20% military. We might say 100% into economic development, but where's the 80%? And Congress just passed a new military budget that has 95% of the funds going for the military in Afghanistan, and only 5% for economic development. And how much of that economic development money you think trickles down to the Afghan people? Almost nothing. After 8 years, it still remains one of the poorest countries on the face of the earth. It still is the country with one of the highest infant mortality rates on earth, one of the highest maternal mortality rates on earth, the worst health indices, and this is after 8 years of, quote, help from the richest country on earth, the United States. So obviously, the U.S. is not trying to lift Afghanistan out of poverty. And when you talk to people about what might end the cycle of violence, they don't say more troops, because they understand that more troops means more civilian casualties means more people, more poor villagers joining the Taliban, more Taliban means more troops, and it is an endless cycle. How do you break that cycle of violence? You don't break it with more troops. You break it with peace talks. There have to be peace talks. And people don't want the Taliban back in power, but they want talks with the Taliban. Because they say that only a small portion of the Taliban are ideologically motivated. They say 70% of them are poor villagers that just are doing it because they're paid $10 a day to pick up a gun and fight against foreign troops. And 25% of them, they say, are not ideologically motivated. They're motivated because they have been harmed by the presence of foreign troops that have killed someone in their family, someone in their village, someone in their community. And so sending more troops will only make more people join. And that they say that for the 70% that is joining the Taliban out of economic necessity, give those people jobs. Provide them with an alternative to joining the Taliban. Doesn't that make a lot more sense than sending in more troops? And then there is the issue of talks with the Taliban. Well, we did talk to a lot of women that were afraid that the Taliban would come back into power, but they said, we want talks with them because we think that if there are talks with them, with us, the women at the table, we can stop more of our rights from being compromised. And some people say, well, that's a very naive position. And they say, watch us at the table, give us an opportunity to be at the table. And so while we were there, we circulated a petition that the women signed that said, we don't want more troops, we want money for economic development, and we want peace talks with women at the table. And we said, how are we going to get this petition into the hands of Barack Obama? And so there was somebody who said, aha, he is having a fundraising dinner in San Francisco last Thursday. And someone came forward and said, the tickets to get into this high-level fundraising dinner are $15,000. And they say, I can't think of a better way than to give it to a person from Code Pink to get into that dinner and be able to talk to Barack Obama. So lo and behold, somebody came forward and said, here we have a ticket for you to go into that VIP dinner. There will only be a little over 100 people there. You will get FaceTime with Barack Obama. And it was beautiful timing because we had just come back from Afghanistan.